Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Nebraskabilities Podcast. My name is Zach,
I'm Andy.
And I'm Nate.
and we are just three regular, crazy fans about Nebraska that is here to talk about Nebraska football. The essential goal overall for those that obviously this is our first episode, so the goal is to just talk about Nebraska football as the season happens, and obviously the season hasn't started yet, so this is the preseason plus game week discussion that we'll have, and the idea is we'll just let the ideas flow and see what we think about it, and hopefully we'll see how many people agree or disagree with us. So if anybody's got any topic to start, let's go with it.
I think that we could all agree since the end of last season ended to now, we are 7-time off-season champs, pretty much.
At least 7 times.
At least 7-time.
I feel like that's shooting low, honestly.
We never fail to have a not eventful off season, whether that is in terms of recruiting or the inevitable COVID NCAA investigation that got handed down to Nebraska finally, at least. But outside of that, I mean, obviously, probably the biggest change outside of that is the hiring of the new offensive staff that Scott made with his staff, and essentially Trev kind of reducing Scott's contract and the buyout date and everything, and that whole restructured contract for Scott. So fair to say that this season is much so on Scott to succeed and perform well than any other time that he has been here the past 5 seasons.
Yeah, it
absolutely
feels like there's a lot on the line this season, especially a lot of the jokes online. Week 0 has a lot of weight for us.
And it does.
It
really does.
I think we'll know by what is game 6. I don't have the schedule pulled up, unfortunately, but whatever our 6 game, we'll know by game 6 where we're standing. If I personally think
Rutgers.
If we even still have Scott Frost at that point,
it's
I think we've all discussed this offline, but I think 4-2 I think is minimum at midseason to keep Scott around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at our schedule, you could argue by the Oklahoma game, I feel like we'll know.
That's true.
By the end of the Oklahoma game, at least, we'll know kind of where Scott's standing is. I mean, we got Northwestern starting up, and then we go North Dakota, Georgia Southern, so it should be 2 games, that you go out and win.
In theory, and this is not to dog on Northwestern, but in theory, with Northwestern not returning as much talent, even though Pat Fitzgerald is a fantastic coach, I do think that Northwestern, I mean, it's starting the season off. Like that's going to be the bar. Like how good is Nebraska at that point? So Northwestern sets the bar for us. And I'm not saying it has to be like it was last year where it's like 56-3 or whatever it was, but we need to set the tone right there, which I thought was interesting because in one of the press conferences, Mark Whipple said that most opening games are lost, which I thought was a really key point to take from that, where, we don't want to be that statistic. We want to be better than that. And obviously, as 3 raging Nebraska fans that probably have at least 2 too many beers every Saturday on Husker game days, we're definitely feeling the same way. But I think outside of the Northwestern game being obviously one of the heaviest games of the year in terms of just how much weight is on it, I think Oklahoma is also a good barometer. I think that's a good spot. I think that's a good. I agree with Nate. But with that, I mean, we're kind of already talking about it, but just throwing it out there. Let's start with what we think we might see as a win-loss record. Let's see how optimistic we are.
I go back and forth on this so much because I obviously love chugging the Kool-Aid, and I love being an optimistic Husker fan. And I mean, looking at the schedule, you can look at it and you can confidently say probably 5-6 wins. And I want to say more. And I've seen the predictions out there of like, oh, they're probably like an 8-9 win team, and I'm like, yeah, that would be great. The issue is, at one point in the Scott Frost era, have we seen that his team is able to achieve that? Now, and what makes this harder for this season is obviously a new offensive staff, new offensive players, transfers coming in on both sides of the ball. And we have no idea what this team is going to look like. And so much riding on Scott for this season to succeed, to keep his job. It's tough to say, like, every year we should be beating Purdue, Illinois, Minnesota, and those are teams that Scott has not been able to beat. I think his best, from what I saw, I think he's 2-2 against Illinois as his best of the Big Ten West teams that we play. And those are teams that like we are expected to beat every year, and Scott hasn't been able to do that. So it's tough to say that I want to see a 7+ win team, 8-win team, but realistically, I'm still sitting here thinking 6-6 because you have to go into Oklahoma at minimum 2-1. If you drop Northwestern, it would be great 3-0, but at minimum you have to go into Oklahoma 2-1 because once you get to, and I mean Indiana, Rutgers are not going to be cakewalks.
No, especially Rutgers. Ironically enough, I think Rutgers has, this is obviously not Nebraska focused, but I think Rutgers has quite a bit of, hype surrounding them too.
And that's,
so I mean, they're going to be
a big Friday night at Rutgers. So I mean, that's a shortened week already for them, and they have to travel to Rutgers on a Friday night to play that game. So that's no cakewalk. But then after that, you get Purdue, Illinois, Minnesota. Like those last 4 games, I mean, most people are going 0-4, and it's hard to reason with them that, we might be able to sneak one game out of there, but it's hard to say like they won't go 0-4 in that stretch because nothing in the past 5 years under Scott has showed me that they can win those games at all. So this season is just going to be one giant pressure game weekly, just for how much is riding on Scott, how much is just riding on,
which is perfect for starting a podcast. And here we are.
There's just so many unknowns going into
the world needed us most
week.
Absolutely, Nate. What you got?
Yeah. Man, I always hate this because I get those real optimistic goggles just looking at our schedule. It looks real juicy to me. I mean,
and I agree with you, Nate. I mean, of all the schedules for Scott, like this is probably the most manageable and or easiest that he's had so far, which is why people are saying like 7-8 wins. But I'm like, yeah, but we haven't done that either.
Yep, I 100% agree with your
not
analysis.
Since our good old boy Mike Riley went 9-4.
Oh man, but I don't know. I see Northwestern. We kind of just ran away with them last year. Like you said, Zach, they haven't necessarily shown a whole lot of signs where they're going to be improving all that much, aside from just Pat Fitzgerald potentially out coaching. I mean, I feel like really our failure mode for that game. But I think there's enough hype around it. There's enough just excitement for that first game. I think guys are going to want to get out and play hard. Really just go after it against Northwestern. I feel like especially after last year, starting off against Illinois, how we did, I feel like a lot of the players are going to remember that and kind of.
I mean, the wind kind of just lost, the Sails just lost all the wind after that first game. And I'm not going to be like the what if guy too much, but in this case, like if we would have won that game in a handy way, like if we would have been like, yep, we handled Illinois like we we thought we were supposed to, especially under the regime of, there's a new head coach. There's a lot of, unknowns around that team.
Mm-hmm.
In theory, Nebraska should have ran away with it, and they didn't. And I think it's going to be huge how we start, like we already talked about. But that first game will absolutely set the tone going forward. I think if we would have trounced Illinois last year, I think last year would have been a little different. I'm not going to say wildly different, but we might have seen a bowl game.
And that's what terrifies me. Is like Pat Fitzgerald is a great coach, and we know whether his team is good or bad. Like, we know he will have his players ready to go, and we haven't seen that with Scott at all throughout his tenure here. He hasn't shown that he's outside of like the helmet games like last year where we showed up for the big games, but then you go walk into obviously like Illinois or Purdue, games that you should win, and then you play absolute garbage, but then you show up against Michigan and you take them down to the last possession. It's like, that shouldn't happen for only just the big time games. That should happen every single game, but you should win. And that's where I think Northwestern has the advantage, just because you have Pat Fitzgerald, who has shown that he can do that.
Absolutely. So if I don't know if we officially said, but if you guys had to put, like at the end of the year, like what are you thinking? Like we gotta cement this in. We might as well start taking betting odds, right? Like,
yeah,
we all have money. We all have money to blow, right?
Oh, I'll look up the odds real quick. I think Nebraska's line is set at 7.5. I want to say, but don't quote me on that just yet. But you two can go with your predictions first, and then I'll.
I mean, Nate, you were kind of finishing off your thoughts, so I'll let you go first.
Gosh, I guess just looking at the rest of it, I mean, like I said, we got Northwestern, then we got the North Dakota, Georgia Southern, which, living in North Dakota, I feel like there's a little bit of a underestimate on how North Dakota might be coming in this year. They they did lose their top running back, but I mean, they were a pretty solid team last year that gave like North Dakota State and teams like that some pretty solid games, South Dakota State as well. And I'm not predicting a big upset, but I wouldn't be surprised to see that one just a touch closer than maybe what some people are thinking. But I don't know. I see those first three as wins, and I'm gonna do it. I think Oklahoma is going to be a little overrated. I think we can pull that one off.
Yeah, that's the other thing that we could touch on too, is like Oklahoma has gone through also a very drastic offseason too, with Lincoln Riley going to USC and taking who's the quarterback? Completely forgot who the quarterback was. Caleb Williams, yes. Yes, he took him to USC. And then USC got the Jordan Atkinson, who is Pitt's wide receiver from last year, who Kenny Pickett had. Which also, you bring that back to Mark Whipple. But I mean, Oklahoma's also gone through a lot of change this offseason too. And who knows what their season is going to be like when they come into Lincoln.
I mean, obviously it's still Oklahoma. Like, you can't.
They'll still be good.
It's kind of like what Nebraska used to be. Like, you can't overlook them too much. But I do agree, Nate. I think they are. I think they might. I mean, they're already, like, as of right now, preseason polls have them at 9, which I don't think is necessarily unfair. I kind of agree with that. But again, you guys hit on the points well. It's unknown. So there's a lot there that is going to be totally different. I don't remember their head coach's name. We should have looked it up. But
Brent Venables.
Yeah, and I think, just because he came from Clemson, right? I think, the way he had his team playing, or his group playing at Clemson, regardless of how much you like them or not, they really enjoyed Venables. And so I think he'll have a team of dogs. I think he will be comparable to like a Pat Fitzgerald in the Big 12. I think no matter what, like, he might field one of the worst teams in the Big 12. Well, now, till they move. But he might field one of the worst teams in the Big 12. but they're still going to go out and play every down for him because he's just that much of a good coach. I don't think it's fair to necessarily, or I don't think it's unfair to say it might be overhyped, but I don't think you can overlook him either. Obviously you can't overlook him.
So Vegas has the Nebraska win total at 7.5, which is where I thought it was. Vegas is definitely bullish on Nebraska because they are still 13-point favorites for Northwestern right now. For a team that we have absolutely no idea what's going to look like in terms of offense.
I agree with that
and
line,
special teams. Right. It's going to, like, the special teams is a whole other topic too, because all new specialists, both punters, returners, field goal kickers, like everybody's new on special teams with a new coach. So we have no idea what the kickers look like either.
The optimistic, pessimistic outlook is it can't get much worse, right?
And that's like Nebraska hasn't won 7 games since Mike Riley.
I do think there is something to be optimistic. I do think the thing to be optimistic about this year is that regardless of what happens, I think unless it's a very specific scenario, and I don't know what that is, but I think it's either going to be we have a good year and Scott Frost shows that he's grown and he's obviously good to go. Well, relatively speaking, he's figured out like his coaching style that works in the Big Ten, and we build upon that. We might not necessarily be, we might go, let's say 9-3. We might go 9-3, and next year we might go 8-4. We might not have the same type of year, and that's okay. But now we might start seeing that he's figured out the system, the process for him that works. Great. Or on the flip side, we see another year of what we've seen from Scott Frost, and we know that at the end of the year, if not the middle of the year, there's change coming. Now, what that change, the change is a little nerve-wracking if that's where it gets to, because who knows what that means. My thought process in that regard is if Scott is not retained, I think interim is for sure Mickey Joseph. That's my take. I think he'd be a great head coach. Obviously, everybody would love him because of the ties to Nebraska, which, give or take what that means to you as a fan, as a listener, whatever. But on the flip side, I think, if he shows, I think he could be similar to like, this is a weird comparison, but like Deion Sanders to Jackson State. He's such a big name for that area and whatnot that like everybody wants to play for him because he's Deion Sanders. Again, Deion Sanders and Mickey Joseph are way different. I understand that. But I think the name game and the recognition that comes with Nebraska fans as well as Nebraska soon-to-be players would be huge. And also, I mean, we've all, the three of us have talked about it. Mickey Joseph seems to be working his wide receivers just as hard as he can to get the best performance out of them, which is great. But with that, like, we haven't officially said it, so I'll be the first one to throw my hat down. I think I'm going to go kind of right down the middle. I think we'll do better than 6-6. But my guess is 7-5. I think 7-5, which is technically the under, obviously. But Nebraska, I mean, it's the Big Ten. I mean, Nebraska is also known for dropping games they shouldn't. But, I do think we have a favorable schedule this year. Plus, I do think, as sad as it is in year 5 with Frost, I think at this point, I think a bowl game is bare minimum. And I know, but I think a bowl game and 6-6, while that would be enough, I don't think it's going to cut it. I think 7-5 with the bowl game and maybe a bowl game win would be enough for me to say, okay, depending on the 5 losses. If it's 7-5 with, Bo Pelini type losses, it's tough to say. That to me that's treading tough water because, I think there might be something there if we go 7-5 and a bowl game win outside of, if we have 5 brutal losses that are just 25 point plus or whatever losses. But, that would show improvement. I mean, to me, that would still show improvement. And I think that's the key to me is 7-5 with marked improvement in all positions, which we talked about kind of with special teams, as well as, what I was going to say, as well as just, I mean, like, look at last year. Yeah, everybody keeps running the joke. We were the greatest 3-9 team in college football, which I hate the joke personally, but it's not. It kind of makes sense because we were in every game we played, including Oklahoma. Oklahoma was supposed to completely rail us, and they didn't. I mean, we still kind of shot ourselves in the foot, and they took advantage of that. But on the flip side of that, we definitely were in every game. Now, obviously, that made all the losses so much more worse. But if we can figure out how to be on the other side of it, where we win the game, I mean that momentum's going to ride high. And so, to me, I think 7-5 is that's where I'm going to put my mark. I'm dangerously putting my mark there, but that's where I'm saying it. So, what do you guys got?
I have been back and forth between 6-6 and 7-5 as well. It's so hard, especially those last 4 games with Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa. It's just like, for sure, you might be able to sneak Minnesota or Wisconsin. In reality, you might lose all 4. And that's it's just like, if you lose those 4 and then, you say you lose Oklahoma, like, yeah, 7-5 season. That's great. You could also go 7-5 and lose North Dakota or, Indiana, but beat Minnesota, Wisconsin. It's like, well, yeah, you look at that. He lost to those teams, but he beat 2 teams that we haven't been able to beat in a while. So it's like, it's just so much goes on to which teams does Scott beat this year. How much does he get blown out by if they lose, type thing. That kind of makes it tough to, like, 7-5 can go a lot of different ways. So can 6-6 of which games you win, which games you lose. Because there's going to be both sides of the ball of, oh yeah, but he lost to North Dakota, but we finally beat Wisconsin this year or something like that. And that's why I feel bad for, like, Trev this year. Because if that's the case, and we don't know what that mystery metric is for his contract of what he has to achieve, we all think it's a win. It probably is a win total. But like, if he does barely meet that win total metric or whatever, but you lose to, like, Georgia Southern, it's like, what does Trev do with that situation? Type thing.
Right.
Do you stick to your word, or you like, yeah, we finally beat Wisconsin or Iowa, but you lost to North Dakota or Georgia Southern. So I think I want to be so optimistic, but I think I'm going 6-6 just because there's just so many variables with this season. And like we saw last season, one wrong play, a punt to the left side and everybody goes right, can change the entire course of the game and the rest of the season. And that's, I mean, they go better, great. That's all I want. Realistically, just looking at it, I think 6-6 is probably where I stand, which obviously is an improvement. It's a bowl game. We haven't gone to one since Mike Riley. There's so many variables and so many things that could happen this season that, yeah, one wrong play again or one penalty, one fumble snap can change the entire game and change a Michigan State win to a Michigan State loss. Just like that. Type thing. But that is where I stand.
Yeah, and I guess I'll preface mine by just saying I think I would be elated if we could make it to a bowl game. 6 wins, I think, is a magic number to get to. 7 would be great. I think I do agree with you, Zach. I think 6 wins is kind of that magic number. Get us to a bowl game. Get us just some of that momentum going forward. I do agree with you guys too that there's a lot of variability with this season, and like you said, Andy, 1 or 2 plays going the right or wrong way could really make the difference. And we saw that last year. We saw where it was just 1 or 2 little things that, whether it was a fumble at Michigan or the the punt return against Michigan State. It's
like, yeah, those 2 plays, those add 2 wins to the record, and you're 4-8 to 6-6, just like that.
Two big wins also.
Yeah,
those
2 big
games alone would be big.
2 big wins and just literally 2 plays. There was 2 plays that changed those to a win.
And then
it changes the entire conversation we would have had this entire offseason.
Yep. It also makes me wonder too, going in, just thinking of the Michigan game last year where we had Teddy Prochaska go down. If he stays healthy the entire rest of the year, does that change our entire outcome? Because our offensive line is able to be more efficient. And
which, side note for that, they have said he's healthy this training camp, so haven't heard anything bad about that. They said he's been playing, so which is really good.
Yep.
Well, outside of the 15 to 20 puke sessions or whatever during practices.
And Scott said that today. They asked him about that today, and Scott said he may have exaggerated that number.
Love it.
May have exaggerated.
Because that's 15 to 20 a practice. That's kind of a lot.
Yeah, I don't know. That was one of those I love Scott Frost, obviously from the Nebraska history, obviously, but like some of the things in just the media stuff like that, just boneheaded. And granted, I'm not going to sit here and say I know what to say. I'm known for sharing too much information myself, so maybe he's like me in that regard. But that's just like, come on, dude. What, like, at least say just 5, like.
Maybe that's
15 to 20 or whatever it was. Like, what is this? What are you doing?
Maybe that's another mystery metric, is he has to be nice to the media. And nice in public appearances.
But I think that's a good segue, kind of.
Well,
it's a weird segue. It's a weird segue, but
we kind of cut Nate off. I don't think Nate gave his prediction yet.
Nate didn't. I'm sorry.
We'll let Nate finish.
Each other. Sorry, Nate.
No, I guess my closing comments on it will be, I'm hammering the over.
The optimistic of the bunch.
What, 9 wins?
I'll let you guys keep your 6 and 7 win seasons. I'm going for 9. I think
there it is.
Yeah,
beating Oklahoma but losing the last 4.
Pretty much. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Yeah. I think we can go on a nice run there. I mean, Oklahoma's really the one that stands out in those first 9 games as the toughest of the bunch. And I think they'll be beatable. I think they're going to be looking down on us a little bit, even after last year. Like, we have a lot of question marks going into it, but I think our offense is going to be revamped. We've got a lot of experience still coming back on defense. We got a lot of the good coaching on defense. I think we can pull that upset off. I just hope they're ranked high enough when we do.
Right.
But past that, we got Indiana, Rutgers, Purdue, Illinois. Those all, like you guys said, it
should win.
They're games that we haven't really been able to pull off. But I don't know. I just have that feeling going into this season that's from drinking way too much Kool-Aid, probably. I feel like these are games we're going to pull off, and this just feels like a different season going into it, whereas last year was kind of like, oh, man, I hope we do all right. Like, this year it's more that prove-it season. It seems like the guys are more locked in. It's not, I don't know. It seems different than last year, and so I think we can run those 9 straight. Even if we don't run 9 straight, lose to Oklahoma, I feel confident enough that we could knock off a Michigan, Wisconsin, or Iowa.
If we go 9-0 into Minnesota,
we've come close. We've come close. If we go 9 wins,
if we go 9-0 and then lose 4.
That discussion, that game day discussion, or not the game day discussion, sorry, that week of.
If you go 9-0 into Minnesota, but then lose the last 4 of your season, I don't even know how I'll feel. Like, yeah, we won 9 games, but we lost the last 4.
Yep.
That's Nebraskabilities, man. Which actually is probably something we should have started with. Last year just for those that are curious where the name came from, we should probably throw that out there. During the Michigan State game last year, where everything looked like a lock for Nebraska to win, somehow Nebraska found a way to lose the game. And so, of course, naturally, it's not just a possibility, it's a Nebraskability. And so, thus we're here now. what prompted us to start it. Obviously, Nebraska, kind of sucks. So we wanted to talk about it. But with that, weird transition, but I like it. I think, that kind of gets us into maybe more of the nitty gritty details. And let's start with roster discussions. I know the roster, like we talked about, way different, totally different. So I guess a good place to start, I think, is the captains. Captains were announced this week, I think. And I think, I was kind of surprised by a couple of them, but I thought Garrett Nelson and Travis Vokalek, probably pronouncing that wrong, not good with names. Those two made sense. Those two made sense. Caleb Tanner also made sense. I think he's shown a lot of growth in the time he's played here. Nick Heinrich was really the main surprise. Not a bad thing. I was like, oh, good for him. Obviously. What's your guys' thoughts?
Yeah, so Scott they announced him that today at the press conference, and he had said that he didn't want to make it seem like, they were doing 2 and 2, 2 from offense, 2 from defense. Because as we know, most of the experience is returning from the defensive side. And he did mention it's not like any of the offensive players, whether they're new players or the transfer players, didn't have leadership skills. It's just the fact that just with the guys that they did choose, those are just the true veterans that have been here a while. Not like Casey Thompson's not a veteran. I mean, obviously we know he has experience. He has good playing time.
But I mean, he's also new to the Nebraska side of things. And I actually agree with everything you just said. I haven't gotten to watch the press conference, but I like that line of thinking, actually.
Yeah, so and he says Casey's a leader on the field, but the guys that they chose were all voted by the players, and those 4 guys had the most votes of anybody else on the team. And he said there were plenty of offensive players that got votes too, but Travis got the most just on the offensive side, and the other 3 were on the defensive side. But I like the picks. I for sure knew Garrett Nelson and Caleb Tanner were going to be for sure on the defensive side. Just the captains, the leaders, just because they've been names that have been around Scott for probably 3 or 4 years. I think they've been here.
Yeah.
But, I wouldn't be surprised. Because I think he did that 1 year to where, he did rotating captains for a bit. I don't know unless I'm just completely thinking of some other team that did that. But I wouldn't be surprised if they had any sort of rotating captain that we might see whoever emerges on the offense. Probably Casey, might be out there for a game or 2 as a captain. But kind of along the captain line too, they said that they didn't award the black shirts yet for the team because when they practiced Saturday, they had already shipped them to Ireland.
Oh no.
So he said, I think when they get there Monday or Tuesday, that they're going to give out black shirts for the defense.
That's awesome.
So kind of along the same captain lines, but I thought that was just kind of funny too that they threw that in there. It's like, yeah, we have the black shirts decided, but they're already in Ireland, so we can't give them out yet.
That'll actually work out perfect though. Taking here's who they thought were going to be black, or now here's who they say are black shirts. How does that translate to the first game? Gives us something to talk about for sure next week. So I love it.
But yeah, I didn't have any issues with the picks of who got voted for captains at all.
You're up, Nate.
Yeah, I didn't really either. There were, they're all like you said, Nick Heinrich, whatever, however you pronounce.
Yeah, Heinrich.
That. Yeah, it was a little bit of a surprise. So he was just a sophomore, so that was, pretty impressive that he's already been able to gain some of that respect from his peers. I think that's definitely a good sign. But yeah, overall, I think it's a good group with Garrett Nelson, Caleb Tanner, Vokalek, and Heinrich.
And obviously, I don't know if we've said this, but if for whatever reason they come across this podcast, congrats to those guys. Big accomplishment. That's awesome. So glad. with that too, then we can kind of start digging into the actual roster. But I guess obviously, I think the two big questions. I know. Let's start with offense. The two big questions with offense are obviously we know that Casey Thompson is the starting quarterback, which we talked earlier. I think it was this last week or weekend or whatever that we were like, "Huh, we didn't see that coming." Like,
everybody knew, but they weren't gonna say anything until it got closer to the game.
Yep.
Right.
It's officially official.
But yeah, it's been officially announced that Casey Thompson is quarterback one. And then I think the big question mark I think on the team is actually not even QB anymore, like it kind of used to be. Is now officially just the O line. Like, how are they going to hold up, especially with the coaching change? And something else that I just thought of as we're talking about it, Mark Whipple getting announced as essentially the head play caller. These three things again kind of leads back to how he said there's so many question marks going in, but how does that make Nebraska's team this year different than the last 4 years? And I think, I guess since I'm still going, I guess I'll just start with my take. Yeah. I think Casey Thompson's going to be great. I think, obviously, I can't speak for you guys, but I think we all kind of agreed at some point that we loved Adrian Martinez as just a Husker in terms of just in his attitude. He was a Husker through and through until he essentially couldn't be, which I think is the worst way to describe it, because I think he definitely wanted to finish here, but I think he knew as well as Scott knew it was time to split ways, which sucks because I really, really thought Adrian Martinez had all the things there, but I think Casey Thompson is a great replacement, and I think he's not going to be the type of guy. He's not going to be our, necessarily the guy that's going to run. He's not going to just start scrambling all the time. Well, in theory, if the line can hold, I think he'll be a great passer, which I think is something that we've needed a lot of work in the past few years. I don't remember the last time personally that I can say I remember having a pure passer at Nebraska, at least keep remembering it well. But on the other side of that, I think he is backed up by a lot of good quarterbacks on the team, that if he's not the guy, and again, I think he's going to be, and provided the O-line can hold for him, I think we've got a lot of good options there. He might not be the same type of guy as Adrian Martinez, but again, I think it was kind of a well-known fact that we needed somebody that wasn't Adrian Martinez. No disrespect to the guy by any means, but I think it was being proven that we needed something different. And again, and if it's, this is also the year that I think we find out if it was actually quarterback play that was holding us back, or if it was just a line play, or maybe a mix of both. And I think kind of the perfect storm this year. What do you guys take?
So, yeah, I agree that the depth at both, probably QB and running back, is probably the deepest that they've been in quite some time. I mean, just the quarterbacks behind Casey that Scott has talked about, of Chuba and Logan, are just battle competition the entire time, even though we all knew probably Casey had the slightly better edge through camp until unless he either got hurt or he performed bad. We all knew that Casey was going to be the starter, but I mean, you have 5 scholarship quarterbacks right now, and we've never really had that before when we had Adrian all for 4 years. As we saw when Adrian wasn't in, our backups, it's tough to rely on those backups, and that's what Scott had said differently with Whipple is, before we had packages designed for each quarterback. So like last year you had one for Adrian, one for Logan. And even before, when we had Luke McCaffrey, you had plays designed specifically for him. Well, now with Whipple, you have all these plays that are designed for all the quarterbacks to learn. So you don't have ones that are just for Casey or ones just for Logan. They probably do, but probably not as much as they had before, which I think is new, it's probably better for the offense. But in terms of like running back and receiver, I mean, those are also a lot of new faces, a lot of new names outside of like Ramir Johnson, Omar Browning. But you lost your leading receiver last year with Samare, who went to the NFL, and I think the running back room is just so interesting to me because you have Ramir, you have Jaquez, you have Gabe Irvin, who got hurt last year, who also looked really good last year. For that, those are like the three big names, I think. They also said Anthony Grant has been playing super well as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I've heard a lot of good things about Anthony Grant coming out of
So
camp
it's like
lately.
those are four names that three of them played last year, not on a consistent basis at all. So that's also, it's like who's going to emerge as the leading either rush back or leading receiving back type thing, and that's why that's kind of like a big unknown to me right now is who is going to be starting game one at running back and who are they going to be like a cowbell running back essentially. Are they going to have 22 plus rushes for 100 yards every game type thing, or are we going to let it sit back and do a running back rotation where they have 10 to 15 rushes per back type in a game? It's that room is just it's so crowded with so many names that we've seen and have heard before, but we just don't know who is going to be that top notch running back. And then receiver outside of Omar Browning, no clue who is going to emerge as the leading receiver. I know Marcus Washington is that transfer, and Trey Palmer, from Louisiana, and then Marcus Washington's the transfer from Texas, who has played with Casey Thompson before, which I think helps a lot there. But I don't. It's just I know they're gonna throw the ball. I just don't think we'll have a 1,000-yard receiver this season for one guy. I think maybe Trey Palmer gets close to 800-900, maybe Marcus Washington, but I don't think we have a 1,000-yard receiver. I would love to be wrong.
All right. So here's where my optimism will kick in. I think this year, personally, and then Nate, I'll let you go. I had to say this before I forgot. I think that Omar Manning might be one of our top receivers. I think this year he's finally gonna, and I shouldn't say he's gonna put it together. I think this year is gonna be the year where he finally gets, he's got a quarterback that has the passing down to where he gets him the ball in that spot, and I think he's gonna have a good year. Now, 1,000 yards, I'm not a betting man. I wouldn't put money on that necessarily, but I think there's a chance, and I think he will have a good year. Mm-hmm. I think he's a standout player for me.
And I only say that because I think Samari had like 900 something last year, and I mean we saw, and he had such a weird year too because it was like the Ohio State game and I think Wisconsin where like he'd have those touchdowns for 70
plus yards.
Yeah, 70 plus yards. Yeah. And then I would have to look it up, but then he would have a game like say against Purdue where he would have 40 yards. And it's just like he was so up and down last year. But he had close to 900 yards, I think, if not more.
I think that sounds right.
But another name I forgot is Oliver Martin last year too. Won't forget. I think it was the Wisconsin game where he dropped the ball because he was scared to get hit. Yep. But that's neither here nor there. But I definitely remember that play.
Oliver Martin.
Yeah, that was I definitely remember that play for sure. But that's who last year our top receiver was Samari, who, I mean, he just had such a flux of a year. I'm trying to look up stats of what he had. Here we go, stats. It's just the tight end room is even more unpredictable because outside of Vokalek, I mean, they're hoping to have Fedoni healthy when he is healthy. He is supposedly like the top recruit tight end that they have. And he got hurt. He had that injury that nobody talked about until like last month. But
what's the status on Fedoni? I thought he was coming back this year.
Said week 6, sometime mid-season.
Dang. Okay. I think obviously everybody was super excited when he came on.
Right, and he was
stand out.
I think they were like, "Oh, he might start over Volkolek," which that was probably a long shot. But I mean, Volkolek is going to be your starter, but out behind him, it's just like I don't know who would be the backup, the tight end, because Volkolek can't play the entire game, which is why they were so high on Fedoni, because he would be it, type thing. But in terms of just receiving options, I think that was, let's see. Yeah, so Samari he had 108 against Northwestern. He had 150 against Ohio State, 113 against Wisconsin. But then he had 1 yard against Minnesota, 42 yards against Michigan State, and 27 against Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. So it's like Samari had such a flux of a season. And then he still ended with 898 yards, so almost 900. Okay. So unless you get that consistent of a number from like Trey Palmer or Omar Browning every single game, I don't think you're gonna have a 1,000-yard receiver on the team this year.
And I think I don't know. That could be a good thing. I feel like that could work more in our favor than not. I think
if it means we're running the ball, yeah.
Between that and just I think passing the ball around,
mm-hmm.
where we have more of a gunslinger like Casey Thompson, I think he feeds a few more mouths than Adrian. I mean, just looking at kind of some of those players that he'll have, like Omar, Marcus Washington, Trey Palmer, Alante Brown. He's gonna have people to throw the ball to. Travis Vokalek, Fedoni when he gets back. And I think that'll really work in his favor. And I think we can just spread out the field more than we have in the past. We're not going to have just Samori Toure that we have to throw to.
Yeah, I agree. It's not a bad option to have that much depth, but it does become an issue to where, like, late in the game, you need someone to go grab that ball, grab that catch. Like Jordan Westerkamp. I mean, like for sure he's going to catch that ball.
Yep.
Like outside of Omar Manning, it's just like, unless someone emerges throughout the season, there's no real like big veteran wide receiver to like late play. We need a downfield pass to get in field goal range. Who's going to make that play? Who's going to make that grab type thing? And that's where spreading it out too much can become an issue unless someone does emerge throughout the season. So it's not a bad thing to have that many options for Casey. Until they're back against the wall and needing to win the game. That's where we'll find out a lot about this team. And I'm almost kind of slightly hoping it happens against Northwestern, because I'm intrigued to see how this team responds to some sort of adversity right out of the gate. Are they going to be like last year, or are we going to see a whole new team?
If we win every game by 30, though, we wouldn't be upset.
Well, nobody would be upset about that either. I would much rather. I would love to prefer that. Absolutely. Be a stress-free season for everybody.
So, I mean, I know we didn't touch on it too much, or maybe you guys did when I had to get up there for a couple minutes. The offensive line, I think, being the biggest question mark. I think, I
have no taste.
Going all in on Casey Thompson, which I thought was great. When we picked him up officially, I was like, awesome. And then, as I started to think about it, I was like, well, our offensive line isn't very good. So what the hell do we do? But with that, I think I will say just, and I don't know how closely, you should follow people that go to the practices from like the Lincoln Journal-Star and whatnot. And I think the new On 3 or whatever that is,
Yes, On 3.
People that, are there. I think it was Sam McEwen or Kewen or however you say his last name. Again, bad names. I think he was the one that came out with an article that said, the offensive line is going to be one of the most, eyeballed parts of the deal this year, more part of the team. But is it his job to fix it? And I'm like, well, yeah, but I saw his point, but at the same time, it's like, obviously, offensive line, I think, is the biggest question mark offensively. And I think, I don't know. I think Nate made a good point earlier with Teddy coming back. I think that's going to be huge.
Helps a lot.
Because he showed he had a lot of potential until he got hurt. He was doing his job, and he was a very exciting player to watch. Which not a lot of people watch the line when you watch a football game, but he knew what he was doing. But then we have a whole new coach in that position, and
that's
not a whole lot of people were necessarily warm on the guy. That's not to take away from his past or anything, but the reception was not the same as when we got Mark Whipple and Mickey Joseph. Like those people, those two, everybody was pretty ecstatic about for the most part. I mean, I didn't see too much negative press there, or not press, but fan reaction. And Raiola.
Yeah.
I think he didn't have the same reaction. Now, granted, obviously, O-line is not an exciting thing to watch. It's not an exciting part of football in terms of the key plays that you see on TV, but they are essential to the team playing well. The game starts and ends in the trenches. Ironic coming from a guy that played running back in high school, but the game starts and ends there. And so, I think that's the key component this year on offense.
I agree with that. There's a lot of question marks with how they're going to perform. There's some names coming back that are familiar, but I think they're, again, a fairly young group still, from what I could tell, and that kind of scares me. Because we have a decent quarterback, running back, wide receiver, even tight end room, but if you can't block for any of them, that doesn't really matter too much.
I do think that is the biggest question mark of the offense, maybe the team in general. Because
if we're going on that, I know we probably got more to talk about, but if we're gonna transition on that, special teams has got to be up there. But I do think our special teams is going to have a hell of a lot better year this year.
Correct.
Honestly,
offense O-line is the biggest question mark. And that's same thing you said with the hiring of Raiola. I mean, it's not like you're bringing in a 40-plus-year-old experienced coach like Whipple into this team. You're bringing in someone who's never been an assistant or like an official offensive line coach before. He's always been an assistant to somebody before.
Yep.
And
dude,
it's the same thing with
the NFL though. So
when that helps.
He did. That's true.
But it's kind of one of those things. Like what I had heard earlier in the offseason is obviously NFL and college are different. He's never had to deal with like recruiting at all in that aspect, and now he has to come in, run an offensive line while recruiting more offensive line to come here that he's never done before. Now, Scott being away from offensive responsibilities probably will help him in a little bit with that, so Scott can maybe do more recruiting. But it's a whole different ball game for him. But Scott loves him, so I guess that's all that matters.
And that's where you put the faith too. Is your head you assume that your head coach knows the best, and obviously as Husker fans we're a little iffy on what that means exactly. But actually, you bring up a good point though, Andy, with that, which I think it was something to hit upon. Was what did you say? I'm sorry, I forgot.
Point.
It'll come back to me, but go ahead and I'll think of it real quick.
Well, it was more of, going back to the Oklahoma Brett Venables. I mean, that's why people don't know about Oklahoma, because this is his first time as a head coach of a program. I mean, he was always an assistant at Clemson, and now he comes to Oklahoma running the show. I mean, it's kind of like Scott's first year as a head coach. He went, 0-13 at UCF his first year? Not saying that Oklahoma's going to go 0-13 by any means. But yeah, it's a lot different going from an assistant to being in charge of something on your own now. And I mean, obviously, we know Scott was always an offensive coordinator or some sort of assistant before he ever became a head coach. So it's definitely a transition period going from an assistant at an NFL to an official like coach of the O-line in college, where you have more responsibilities now. You have probably more daunting task of game week versus recruiting, and how you split that up versus.
And that was the point that I was going to make earlier,
Yeah.
just before I forget, was with Scott. I think a key thing this year is the fact that he is not stepping down some of his responsibilities, but he's now going to be more of a game manager rather than trying to run the offense. And, I have no idea what goes into that. Obviously, that's not what I do on a day-to-day basis. But I personally think he was trying to do too much. And so him stepping back some of those responsibilities, I think, will help actually make a huge impact on the team.
For sure.
Dog.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah, it's such a new aspect, and that's kind of the other thing that worries me about the offense is outside of all the new transfer players and new players, you have all these coaches that are brand new to each other. It's not like the staff that Scott had brought with him from UCF to where they already know each other and they know what it's like, and just going to a new school. I mean, these are 4 different new guys that are coming to a new school that have never coached with each other, coaching new players that have never been to Nebraska either, that are, trying to save Scott's season essentially in his career at Nebraska right now. So that's why it's so many variables on offense right now. And the only constant we have going for our transition point next to defense, that we haven't really heard a whole lot about defense throughout the offseason, and no news is good news, essentially. We know that Chins is doing probably good work. I think we can all agree the biggest transfer for him was O'Shawn Mathis. For sure. Coming in to
absolutely
the defensive side, opposite of what I would assume of Garrett Nelson for your edge rushers, is probably how that's going to look. But they needed another veteran presence on the line outside of Garrett Nelson, because you lose Ben Stilley, you lose, I don't know who else they lost last year, but not necessarily a line person, but obviously you lose JoJo at some sort of nickel linebacker blitz rusher as well. So those are 2 huge presences you have to replace. And Garrett stepping up is good, but
I think one that I think a lot of people are obviously high on just from last year was definitely Luke Reimer. I think he was huge.
Yes.
I think he's another one that you can add into this pool of people. That's one that, I mean, we've all, I don't know how closely you guys follow like the Facebook pages or anything like that, but they've been talking about how I think Luke has been a watchable player for one of the defensive awards, which, obviously it's preseason. We're all kind of assuming based on how last year went, but that's still a huge thing. Like we went 3-9 last year. That's terrible. That's not what Nebraska fans want to see, but he's still being looked at for this award. And I think that's great. I think you're right. I think our defense still a little nervous because we did lose a lot of good. I mean, we lost a lot of good players. I will say I think JoJo was the spark of the defense last year. There was obviously other players that were just as good that fit their role well, but I think JoJo was the catalyst that ran the defense. Granted, he was here for what felt like 48 years, so that helps. But I'm curious to see who I think is going to be kind of the guy that comes out as the catalyst for the team this year, which I think could be Luke Reimer. I think Luke Reimer could be the guy that is the one that pumps the team up, in the face of adversity or whatever. We might be up 40 points or whatever, but hopefully at that point, if we have their second and third string in there, if that's the case, but even then, like somebody's got to be the one that's pumping the players up, and I think Luke would be the one to watch for that.
And I think it probably does say something that, Heinrich is a captain. So obviously he had a great fall camp at linebacker that obviously he gets made captain his junior. I think it's his sophomore season. But, it's probably something that what happened during fall camp is he must have really stepped up, must have really improved on the defensive side to be named captain already. So, I mean, most of us probably would have said, Gifford based off of just last year alone, after JoJo. But so he must have stepped up really well during fall camp to earn that leadership spot already, and probably going to be a starter. I would imagine with Luke, or I think Isaac Gifford is also still in the rotation for linebacker as well. He played a little bit last year too, but so I think Isaac is more of JoJo's role in terms of position as a nickelback over a linebacker, but I think we'll see a lot of him too, for sure.
I'm hoping we see something out of Noah Pola-Gates too. And he's safety, but I think he'll have a pretty decent year. I mean, he'll finally get to break out, I think. What you got, Nate?
I was just gonna say, I think my pick is Garrett Nelson.
Yeah,
Garrett Nelson, I think, is also going to be a huge standout.
That dog in him, and I mean, there's a little bit of Western Nebraska bias in me, so having him from Scottsbluff, excited to see him playing well. But just all the interviews and things I've seen of Garrett Nelson, he seems like he's going to be one of those guys that can really pump up the room. And
I mean, we did kind of skip over him, I think, or maybe I'm just forgetting. But Caleb Tanner, obviously, if they think he's captain material, I think obviously he's going to have a good year too. He's obviously matured in his position. I think he's definitely one to watch.
I think their corners are fine. I think I am more concerned about like the safety-ish position, because you have obviously you can kind of rotate like Caleb, Miles Farmer last year. Just looking at these other names. I mean, Omar Brown maybe, but I mean, there's a lot of new corners and safety names that we didn't see last year, because obviously you lose Cam Taylor-Britt in that rotation. For that, Quentin Newsom's still there, so he's probably going to be a starter for sure. But I've heard a lot of people that are high on Tommy Hill as either a special teams returner or possible starter at corner. Because if I remember right, he might be the transfer from Ohio State, or he's just a recruit, and I'm completely thinking of somebody else.
But that actually works out really well, Andy, because I think that's the other thing we got to talk about is special teams.
Right.
Obviously a pretty weak spot on our team last year.
Tommy Hill's just a recruit, so I'm thinking of somebody else.
But for special teams, obviously, the team last year was, what were we, second worst? Is that what it came out to be?
I would believe it.
I mean, I think we were in all of ranked college, and I say ranked like this, college football. I think we were second. We were, bottom five. I remember reading that stat. We were bottom five. I mean, I'm sure somebody out there will message me and correct me if I'm wrong, but nobody's going to sit here and argue that we were good last year at special teams. And obviously, I think we went and corrected course and got ourselves a specific person for special teams. Is it Bill Bush? I think is his name.
Yep.
And I do think that's going to be huge. Unfortunately, special teams is kind of one of those things that you don't really hear or see much about it until the year starts. So, I mean, we really don't have much to talk about, I think, other than the fact that we hired a specialist or a key position point for that. But that kind of goes back to the overall conversation that I think, whether it's Trev Alberts strong-arming Scott to saying you need to do this, or Scott on his own volition saying we need to get these position coaches filled, essentially. Growth is happening somewhere. Now, whether the growth actually is going to amount to anything, obviously we don't know. But I do think the key parts, and I guess not to cut anybody off unless you got more to talk about, but I think we kind of talked a good amount on it, is I think we've got the key parts to be a really, let's say, really decent football team.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm trying to not be too optimistic. I think we can hit strides of good and even great this year, but obviously the key points being, you know, we got a lot of question marks at a lot of different places, a lot of new people, but we also have a lot of presence from veteran players that are coming back in quite a few places. And even if they're not veteran players at Nebraska necessarily, they're veteran players in their position. Casey Thompson being an example, you know, Omar Manning being an example of somebody that's been at Nebraska for a while, which he might not necessarily have the greatest statistics to show, but he's been a veteran of the Nebraska way. I mean, by all accounts, he could have left in the last 2-3 years or however long he's been here. You know, my brain is not remembering all that detail right now, but he could have absolutely left, and he didn't. You know, he's stuck it out, and I think I think a lot of that mentality that now I think we got a lot of players that are here to play for, you know, the Nebraska N, if you will. You know, they're playing for the front of the jersey, not the back. But I think it's one of those things where I think now we're going to see a new leaf turned in a way that we've got enough new people that's going to spark a lot of good play because they want to play. Like they want to play for Nebraska. You know, they might not be the greatest player in the world, and that's okay. You know, but they are going to work their ass off, and they're going to be, you know, the best they can absolutely be. And I think outside of the big question marks, which to me is the O-line, the special teams putting it all together this year, and just the overall new amount of people, I think this year could shape up to be a good year, but I do think there is cause for not concern's not the right word, but I think there's some cause for skepticism.
Yeah.
But I think we're going to see, again, I mean, this kind of goes back to our original, our first point. I think we're going to see a lot of good things from the Nebraska football team. Is it going to amount in wins? We will see.
And I like kind of what you were touching on there, Zach, for a little bit. You just mentioned that there's a lot of just kind of passion missing from the roster in a sense. Like you could tell that there were some players that were out there and not necessarily, I don't know, playing for that jersey on the front, not really playing for the team. And so I think just looking forward, looking at the roster, looking at the guys we've got, it seems like we're kind of turning that page, turning that new leaf, getting a lot of guys in there that I think really want to make this program better and make it kind of give it some more national prominence back to where it's been.
Yep. For sure. If I had to rank it, I think I don't want to say most concerned I'm about is special teams. The more intrigued is the offense of what I think. I'm concerned about the offense just because there's a lot of new pieces, but I'm more intrigued on the offense and more concerned about special teams because special teams hurt us a lot last year. We left a lot of points and we let up a lot of points. Obviously the punt return against Michigan State, but the blocked punt against Iowa, I mean, changed that entire momentum of that game. Because we were up, we were winning, and I mean that happened, and then we fell apart after that.
Yeah, we were at that game. You could feel the
the life got sucked out of that stadium after that because everybody in that stadium had the same thought: was here we go, this is it, this is where everything changes. Not too concerned about the defense. I mean, I think we all agree Shenander's done a great job of. Obviously, last year they kept us in all those games. We just shot ourselves in the foot. But I mean, even since Chenander got here, I mean, I still think he's been a good defensive coach. And yeah, there's some big pieces you have to replace this year, but I think he is a good enough coach to be able to fill those spots and do a good enough job to keep us in games with the defense, for sure.
Which I think is something that now that you say that is going back to an earlier discussion we had just as a talking point. We talked about, you know, if Scott Frost isn't the guy, who might be, I said Mickey Joseph, but Eric Chenander absolutely would deserve, I think, a shot at the head coach spot. He's it's been proven time and time again.
And we can definitely touch on that topic.
Players. Oh, for sure. He's got players that have played for him, and they absolutely will go to bat for him. And he'll go to bat for his players. He reminds me very much like Bo Pelini in terms of player to coach interaction, and I think that's huge. Obviously, it shows. And then with that, sorry, Nate, didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're all good. That's about all I had.
I guess one way we could wrap it up is we can kind of look at Saturday, give some predictions, see how we're feeling about Saturday, because it is technically game week right now. It is quickly approached. It's been a long off season for all of us, and I think just for those that want football back.
It's time.
The whole nation gets its first football game to watch us against Northwestern in Ireland.
All right. Well, with that, Andy, lead us off. What you got for a prediction?
So I'm basing it solely off the spread. So spread is still 13 in favor of Nebraska. Over under is 50.5, which that's extremely low. Considering that's a 2-score differential and your over under is 50.5. Usually it would be like 60 plus if you have like a 2-score win. So Vegas thinks we're gonna blow out Northwestern. I would definitely take Northwestern on the spread. I don't think it's gonna be us by 2+ scores. I think it's going to be probably 10 points, but obviously I'm predicting a Nebraska win, but I don't think we're going to win by more than 13. Like we've said earlier, there's just too many variables going into this game to where it's not going to be a blowout, I think it'll be close, but I still think we probably win by probably 10.
Yeah, you got like a score you want to attach to it, just because then we can start writing it down and keep track of how close we are.
I think. God, I didn't even think about this either. I want to say
if you don't have one, we can go to Nate and then
Nate can
end with you.
I definitely for sure a Nebraska win. Go to Nate. I'll come back when I think of a score that's reasonable.
Okay, so I think we got a lot of question marks, but I think we got that defense returning. I don't know, just a lot of intensity. Got a lot of firepower on offense. I just don't see. Yeah, Fitzgerald's a great coach. I just don't see Northwestern making that big of a leap. I don't think we're gonna see 56-7 again. I think is what the score was, something like that, somewhere in that ballpark. I don't think we're gonna see anything quite as spectacular as that, but I'm thinking we can get some scoring done. And I think defense, I think there will be a few lapses. I can see that early season just kind of jitters getting to him, but I'm going, I think 31-14. I'll go on the over for that spread there.
Okay.
All right. Then I'll take it from there. And obviously, this is a Big Ten game. And so we all know Big Ten games are famous for being something like 2-10 or 3-14.
Middle of November in the snow.
And Big Ten games can go.
Here, I forgot to even check what the weather's going to be like in Dublin.
Probably 50-ish and raining, if I were to guess.
It sounds like Ireland, I think.
I'm looking it up right now. I'm going solely based off what Ireland is usually like.
66 degrees.
Oh man,
partly cloudy on Saturday.
Okay,
perfect football day. Let's be honest, perfect football day. But anyway,
really there's a chance for rain or anything, so we might actually luck out on that.
God, that's cool.
But no, again, it's a Big Ten game. not only that, it's the first game. It's a week 0 game, so I mean it's even earlier than our normal week 1 game that Nebraska would normally play. With that though, I think what you're going to see is two Big Ten teams going at it and just knocking the rust off of each other. Meaning, I think, ironically enough, and I don't gamble, but I think the line is actually good. I think, what was it? Did you say 50.5?
For over under.
50.
Yeah.
Sorry,
13.
over and under. Yeah, sorry. 50.5 over and under, I think, is actually a good guess. 13-point spread to me is ridiculous.
So that's a lot of points.
I don't think, I think they'll hit the over. I don't think Nebraska's going to hit, or sorry, I think they'll go. Yeah, I think they'll hit the over, but I don't think Nebraska's going to have that 13-point spread. And it's not because I'm trying to dog on Nebraska. I think it's, again, these two teams. It's been a long off season for everybody. It's going to be knocking the rust off. That said, I am going to go a little bit higher than Nate, I think, and I'm going to go 36-16 or 17. Sorry, 36-17, which definitely hammers that over. But
I would love to know your math to get the 36. Not that they can't. That's like,
or
unless you're saying they get to 30 and go 2 field goals after that, but you don't. I'm not trying to dish your score.
I'm saying, well, never know. I don't know. I'm going to throw 36 out there. I think it'll happen.
No, you stick with your guts. I love it.
36 is just one of those numbers that stuck out to me. I'm like, I think it's
stick with your guns. No, I love it.
17. Yeah, no, I think I do think I think Nebraska will win handily. I think what's going to happen is the spread's going to be missed because of garbage time. I think Nebraska will win, but I think it's going to be one of those things where if you gamble, I wouldn't do that. I'd actually hit the over. But
right.
What you got, Andy?
So I think I'm going to go 35-24. Over hits, but 11 points. I still think it's under that spread. That's so many points to leave on a week 0 game. Not in the States at all, which is, I mean, that's going to be hopefully not an issue for either team. Hopefully they figure out the travel and the sleep schedules and everything. But I mean, that's another variability you have to throw in there. It's a out of country game for the start of the college football season. So all bets are on the table with that, but I still think Nebraska wins 11 points, but I think it's hopefully a good showing. And if they blow them out, great for us. Would love that too.
Tell you what, if we get that 13-point spread and it's on Nebraska's favor, I'm all for it. I will take.
I'll eat the loss.
I would gladly eat the loss on that. So, I think with that's going to wrap up our first episode going into week 1 of the Nebraska football season of the Nebraskabilities Podcast. And with that, we thank you for listening, and we will see you next week.
Peace.